This week, the United States Congress has been actively discussing a bill by Senator Lindsey Graham, which provides for unprecedentedly tough sanctions against Russia. In this episode, we will discuss the essence of this document, and I will explain why, after a months-long pause, it has become relevant again. Well, we will also talk about why this Lindsey Graham bill is dangerous for Russia, the reasons Congress delayed its adoption, and what concessions congressmen are willing to make to Donald Trump just to impose sanctions against Russia. My name is Alexei Pecci. Today is July 10th. More details ahead. But before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pecci News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, as you know, this week Senator Lindsey Graham announced that the Senate will consider her sanctions bill on July 9th. However, today is already the 10th and no vote has taken place. However, the Republican Senate Majority Leader John Thune said that the document is still being worked on. Here is his quote: "We are working with the Donald Trump administration and the House of Representatives to try to come up with a finished version." So according to John Thune, a vote is possible before the August recess in Congress. If that doesn't happen, they won't return to it before September 9th. But overall, the review process depends more on political calculations than on the congressman's schedule. Meanwhile, Senator Lindsey Graham himself was in Rome today, July 10th, at a conference on the reconstruction of Ukraine, where he also took part in a meeting of the Resolute Coalition. For the first time, American government representatives attended such an event, marking a significant moment. I talked about it in detail in the previous episode, so if this is your first time on my channel, go ahead, subscribe, and watch the previous episode. But what does Graham's law on hellish sanctions against Russia actually propose? Lindsey Graham's bill was registered back in April of this year amid Donald Trump's indecision about imposing sanctions against Russia. It is sometimes also called the Graham-Blumenthal bill, named after Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, who is also actively promoting this initiative. And it was precisely the bipartisan approach that promised the bill's success in the Senate. As the authors of the bill stated, its goal is to apply such serious pressure on Russia that the Kremlin would eventually agree to stop its aggression against Ukraine and enter into genuine peace negotiations. Lindsey Graham's bill provides for a whole range of direct and indirect restrictions against Russia. In particular, this includes freezing assets and banning transactions for high-ranking Russian officials, military personnel, oligarchs, and other individuals who support the Russian military. The document imposes sanctions against key banks such as the Central Bank of Russia, Sberbank, and Gazprom Bank. At the same time, it prohibits United States institutions from conducting transactions with Russia and restricts Russian organizations from listing securities on United States stock exchanges. In addition, and here are three more important points, the bill prohibits the export of energy products from the United States to Russia and investments in the Russian energy sector. It introduces secondary sanctions against foreign companies that support the extraction of energy resources in Russia, including the oil, gas, and uranium sectors. In fact, this means that all Western companies that in one way or another continue to work with Russians in mineral extraction will have to completely leave Russia or face sanctions. In addition to these sanctions, the bill establishes significant trade restrictions and introduces 500% tariffs on all goods and services of Russian origin. These are energy products which will be applied in addition to any existing tariffs. In addition, secondary trade tariffs of 500% are introduced against countries that knowingly sell, supply, transfer, or purchase oil, natural gas, uranium, petroleum products, or petrochemical products of Russian origin. These tariffs will apply to all goods and services imported into the United States from these countries. It sounds impressive, it really sounds dangerous, but why hasn't the bill been passed yet? Although as many as 85 out of 100 senators supported the initiative, Lindsey Graham himself is in no hurry to lobby for its actual consideration in the Senate, waiting for informal approval of the bill by the President of the United States, although he regularly reminded the public about his initiative. But there's an important point here. In recent weeks, Senators Graham and Blumenthal have made trips to Ukraine and European capitals in parallel to coordinate positions with the United States partners. In other words, preparations are underway. And Europe responded by agreeing to introduce a new 18th package of sanctions against Russia in parallel with the United States if they introduce their own. A shift in this regard occurred at the end of June when, after another phone conversation with the Russian dictator, Trump began expressing dissatisfaction with Putin's actions. On June 29th, Lindsey Graham stated that he had reached an agreement with the President of the United States, although some points of the bill had to be softened and even rewritten. And this is where the essence of Donald Trump's approach to sanctions against Russia lies. The new version of the bill includes a number of provisions that give the President of the United States more room to maneuver regarding Russia. The White House insists that the document should preserve the President's exclusive powers in matters of foreign policy. The essence is that the final decision on whether or not to impose any sanctions will be made personally and solely by Donald Trump, and the bill will not obligate him to do so. This undermines the very essence of decision-making in the United States on matters of foreign policy, but it seems that Congress is ready to go for it. Therefore, Trump will have to come to the official conclusion that Russia either does not want to move toward a peace agreement, or is violating already reached peace agreements, or is committing new aggression against Ukraine, or is trying to overthrow the government in Kyiv. That is, only after he officially states one of these points, sanctions can be imposed. Among the possible relaxations of the bill that are being discussed is the introduction of a presidential delay. According to it, Trump can postpone the application of the 500% tariffs for 180 days once. A second delay is also possible, but it requires congressional approval. The delay does not apply to those countries that are recognized as sponsors of terrorism. And back in May, the agency, citing anonymous European diplomats, reported that some countries, particularly Germany and Hungary, expressed concerns about secondary tariffs. In response to these concerns, the senators agreed to include a provision in the bill that allows the United States President to exempt certain countries, goods, or services from the tariffs for 180 days on national security grounds. According to politicians, exceptions for certain goods were added to the bill. They concern humanitarian aid and activities related to United States intelligence. According to sources, these changes were aimed at reducing resistance from some Republicans and the Trump administration, who advocated for greater flexibility in implementing sanctions. That's what the senators' aides are saying. Overall, if the bill is finally passed, it still retains the truly dangerous sanctions for Russia and its partners. But the full authority to make the final decision remains exclusively with Donald Trump. It's uncertain if he will impose sanctions, but this also poses a risk. He may decide that sanctions need to be imposed. And then, on the same day, he could immediately decide to use his presidential delay for 180 days. And he'll say to Putin, "You have a 180-day window. Let's end the war. Otherwise, we won't postpone these sanctions anymore." But still, that's another 6 months of war. That's why sanctions are a very tricky issue here. And now we're waiting for Congress to finally vote on this bill. This will mean that Trump really wants to get this tool in his hands. That's all for now. Share your thoughts in the comments below.